The following pages are a compiled list of stories and data about a group of individuals on the internet who prey on unsuspecting fans of various video games, TV shows, and movies. They take money, time, self-worth, self-confidence, sanity, and freedom away from those they target, sucking them into a schizophrenic constructed fantasy cult based around things they once loved. This is 100% non-fictional. There is some pretty sick stuff in here. Violence, sexuality, physical abuse, etc. So please be aware if you wish to proceed. I wish this was a joke, but thanks to the internet, it is not. Be aware that the events which happened in some of these stories, like mine, happened years ago. Many of the people involved had patched up their lives and moved on, but still wished to warn others against horrors like those they experienced. Many of them got into these situations because they were young and stupid, pretty much early college age. This page is not for them, it's for the people who are ideal prey for this group of individuals, or, those who have horrendous train wreck syndrome. This all went down several years ago, starting with innocent internet friendships and spiraling completely out of control into something that most normal people will find wholly unbelievable. Once I escaped the loonies, I decided to write out my experiences and share them with the internet. Almost immediately, other survivors of this group of nutcases began to send in their stories as well. Naturally, the people who ran this Fantasyland cult were unhappy. They deleted live journals, they accused everyone involved of lying, they accused me of inventing it all because I was quote-unquote on drugs, despite their knowing I was not. They claimed that personal accounts written were not true, and in the same breath began to attack the people who had not written them. They hopped fandoms, from Final Fantasy to Hellsing to Incredibles to Heroes, and hopped states, but have never been able to shake the fact that they very obviously did these things and people have very obviously got sick of being quiet about it. Everything here is true. Everything here is 100% real. Some names were changed to protect identities of those involved, but that is all. Everything else is 100% accurate. The only instances in which things will be changed is to add facts. It is all true. The crazy people involved and their other selves. Jen, also known as Genova, Sephiroth, Rowan, Syndrome, Ultimecia, Kuja, and President Shinra, etc. Hojo, also known as Renee, Del, Cloud, the Raven King, Metatron, and Ekthros. Angel, also known as Anna. The Cetra, also known as Eris, Rain Crystal, Catherine Rain, Greta, Marie, Matthew, Odessa, and Candy Wrapper. This all happened a while ago. Checking old journal dates, it was 2002. And I was fucking stupid then, as you will see. I should have seen obvious signs and didn't. People have noted that I was stupid. They are smart and they are right. The reason this is up here is so other people will read it and not be as stupid as I was. Again, for clarification, what I did was not smart. People have been saying how it takes strength to go through this shit. No, it takes sheer unbridled idiocy. Just cause it was stupid though, doesn't mean it couldn't happen to someone who was just as dumb. This story isn't for people who can identify the stupidity immediately. It's for those of you who have live journals named things like I wish I was anime and spend time role-playing online. I was inspired by reading someone else's account of internet crazies gone bad. Now, this has been in my head for a long time. There is a group of very dangerous individuals out there and I really would like to detail what they did to me and mine. I want to warn people away from them. I want you to read my mistakes and watch out. These people are dangerous. This is not a joke. This is my experience with them. Hojo.org. How, when, where, why, what the fuck. Most people watching the journal now probably don't know this, but back in the day I ran a pretty popular website devoted to the characters Cloud and the very minor character Zack from Final Fantasy VII. It was really the only comprehensive one out there about the two, which was why I got such notice. I was used to receiving fan mail or other people's fan art which I will put up on the website. I actually haven't had anywhere near that kind of fame since then, and believe you me, I don't miss it. But anyway, I had my AIM up on the website because I was new to interweb famedom and wanted people to come talk to me about the site. Feedback was awesome in my eyes. I met a lot of cool people this way, like Radia. I was always looking to promote the site, so when I got an IM from some stranger offering a link exchange, I was like, oh boy. I was expecting a little podunk GeoCities page, but then they told me they ran the domain hojo.org. I've never been there before, but I ran a quick check. It looked mostly personal, with a little bit of a shrine to the character Professor Hojo from the same game. This person introduced themselves to me as Hojo, and pretty quickly started calling me Zack. I was okay with that, because Zack was and still is my favorite character in the game. For a while, it was mostly normal. This Hojo person seemed to be just another normal webmaster. We didn't have a whole ton in common, so we didn't talk that often. So one day, I had just got done putting up some art by Arborwin. It was of the villain/monster Genova as a dog creature, Melze. I gave it a little mini-story under the image to be creative, something about cold water and being strangled by tentacles. I don't even remember now, but Hojo IMs me and tells me that it was really well written. I am flattered, so I thank him. Then it starts getting weird. I'll try to remember how it went, but it's been 4 years. It was really realistic, he says. Is that a memory? Understandably, I'm like, what? Is that one of your memories? I was unfamiliar with the concept being put to me at the time, being still pretty internet virginal. I said no, I just made it up. He seemed disappointed and I didn't understand why. We didn't talk for a few days. Then an IM comes at me where he says, my wife would like to talk to you. Oh, how cute, I'm thinking. It is this married couple who runs a Hojo shrine. Sure, I'll talk to your wife. Wives are nice people. Idiot alert. Now realize, during this time I was a college freshman. Like most college freshmen, I was at the height of my idiocy. Friends will remember I wasn't quite smart about drinking, to be really kind. And so, I hate to say it, but my memory of this time is spotty. I'm going to remember what of the build-up I can. The actual events are clear as crystal though. This shit doesn't leave you. The wife, whose name is Jen, begins pressuring me about magic. Now, I was a pagan for a brief stint in high school, but like most kids, I grew out of it. What she was telling me was long since bogus in my mind, but I put up with it okay. She kept saying how she was a sorceress and stuff. Half of the time because she insisted I call her Genova and will emote poking me with tentacles and stuff. I figured she was just role-playing. I was like, okay, that's cool. It's the internet. I have some friends who are furries and do the same thing. Talking about their tails and stuff. I can deal with that. Then came a good old bombshell. I was asked if I had any memories of past lives. I do believe in past lives. I think it's a pretty valid cycle given how many cultures believe in it. So I told her, no, I didn't, but I do believe in it. I should never ever have said that. It was like inviting the vampire into my house. Jen's attack was swift and sure. She began in a flurry explaining things to me, how there are alternate universes. Do you grant me that? Sure, there could be. And in those universes, maybe, just maybe, video games actually happened. I thought it could be plausible because I like imagining anything's possible. Through all this and all this flurry, she tells me that she thinks in a past life I was Zack from Final Fantasy VII. Think about it, she said. You are both country grown, you both have that instinct of dragging off friends who could be left behind. You'll take a bullet for someone, right? You say you don't believe in magic or any of that, and he wanted to be a mercenary. For all of his 5 or 6 lines, you have a similar speech pattern. You even live in a basement, like he was locked in one, and you hate it. Addle your brain with freshman idiocy and vodka, and this will suddenly make sense. Sure, maybe. I'm not him now, I said, but it was possible. You were our Zack, she says. By our, I later found she meant a large group of people whom had been similarly led to the conclusion that they had maybe been video game characters at some point in time. There was an Ares, a Sith, etc. They led with an overweight dislikable man called Gast. For those unfamiliar, these are all characters in the game. Some, like me and Sid, who I still call Sid, although also now Meho and Serial, had one foot in reality despite it all. I was willing to bite and say maybe at some point I was this guy, but I was also not about to model my life after a game. But they seemed to just want a new friend and some online roleplaying, and I was pretty cool with that. For the most part, we didn't touch on the past life thing at all. Jen will sometimes have chats with other people who she was friends with, and we will all talk, or we will discuss side additions or just little things. All in all, I was fine with them. They were a little flakier than my preferred loaf of bread, but I could live with that. They always called me by my screen name, which confused me. Yasha made me cringe, because I was afraid people, even 4 years ago, will think I was an Inuyasha fantard. I tried mentioning this once or twice, but I didn't really get anywhere. The first time they asked me to visit them, I think, was around Christmas. It will cost me around $300 to go by bus from my podunk school to their apartment in State College, and they assured me that they will pay to feed me. I will just visit for a weekend to meet people and hang out. At the bus stop, Hojo met me in a lab coat. Hojo was, I know by now, actually a girl, not trans. They were lesbians, and that was cool with me. I'm just noting it here to avoid future confusion. When we arrived at the apartment, Jen, who insisted I call her Genova and will sometimes refer to herself as Jenny Nova, came storming up to Hojo and I, screaming in Hojo's face. I have no idea what it was about. She was wearing a purple skirt pulled up around her breasts. It looked like she had just gotten out of bed, and I was, to say the very least, intimidated. About 3 seconds later, she whirled around in a quick change. Suddenly, the nicest person ever appears. Whatever she was mad about was out the window. It was the weekend before Christmas, and all throughout the apartment was a pretty big mess. I brought my rat with me because I planned to go from State College straight home to Brooklyn. I had also brought Christmas gifts. Jen had told me earlier she was a great artist, so I had dropped $30 on real high-quality watercolors for her. The apartment was cluttered and there were some papers and stuff everywhere. The floor was covered in glitter, but I figured they were just kinda goofy college students. I mean, college students make a mess. But when Jen showed me her art though, I realized she would have no idea how to use the watercolors I had brought her. They were, at best, a brush being slopped around the page. Nervously, when I gave over the gift, I asked her if she knew how to use them. Of course. Okay, I said. Maybe she just hasn't had the good tools. But she does know how to use them. She was very happy though, and that was what mattered. Never mind that the next time I visited, the watercolors were entirely used up. The concept of mixed pigment and water was not known to Jen. She thought you used them like acrylics because of the texture of the pigment. I was taken around town for the weekend and introduced to quite a few random people, most of which now I can't really remember their faces or their names. One, in all likelihood, was the super awesome Jai, who is like my surly mentor. It was snowing, I remember, and very cold. I'm not good at being introduced, so for the most part I try to keep away from stuff going on. I do remember in the mall, Jen had what was to be the first of several incidents where I felt frightened of her. She stormed to the side of the mall inside and began sulking. The reason for this was because they didn't have enough money to buy something. I don't even remember what it was that she wanted, and they couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford it either, so I was stuck in the middle of this. I tried to stay out of it. Fortunately, it seemed to have passed when we got back to the apartment. We had a good time, piling up stuffed ladybugs and laughing at the Minagi bug. About this time, I started to realize though, Jen was not role-playing when she talked about her children and other selves. Jen is what the internet calls a soulbonder, or in other words, batshit loony. She believes she has a lot of people living in her head talking, and when she wants to take on a personality that best fits the situation for her personal gain, she acts one out. For example, if she wanted to get sympathy, she will raise the pitch of her voice and pretend to be an innocent child. Now, I was a dumb college freshman, but I was not brain damaged much yet. I knew Jen was just pretending. I had already experienced the actor acting for self-gain with a high school drama friendship, so I just humored her when she did this, but wasn't about to treat her any different. About this time, I got into a fight with my mother, who expected some usual unreasonable nonsense from me. My mother is the only person who can make me cry, and because my view on crying is, if no one is around to care, why bother doing it? I let myself cry there. Jen and Hojo suggested I stay longer and began talking about very drastic measures. That I needed to get away from my home, that I could abandon my family, here's the number of a youth support group, etc. I honestly was frightened by this. My family is certainly high on my list of things I get stressed all to kingdom come by. but I don't want to cut off all means to them ever. I managed to work it out so I will go home 2 days later, as a sort of take that to the family. Jen told me that her mother was the same way and that Hojo had to go all the way to California to rescue her. Jen's mom was apparently a horrible, abusive person who hated her daughter for being a lesbian. Her father was absent or divorced or something. It was never clear. She kept saying how even though her grandmother was rich, she didn't love her. She had stories about her abusive friend who trained her to become a Sephiroth or something. I was sympathetic, always having been one to believe in that "don't complain, people have it worse than you" shtick. So a few days later, we went to the bus stop to catch my bus to Brooklyn. I was crazy beforehand because my rat was still in her tribal cage after about 4 days and I had no money and on and on. I wanted to get to the stop early so I wouldn't miss the bus. Jen assured me that she knew what time the bus was. Because it was her computer, I couldn't check for myself. When we got to the bus station, they told me my bus had left an hour ago. I was delayed 1 day by what Jen swore was an honest mistake. I was willing to believe it. I went home. Overall, the first visit was not so bad. I visited them frequently because they always seemed to want me to meet someone. I met up with Eris, who I've since called the Cetra. She was a cool, nerdy college girl with a big brain. She liked old RPGs and had been to Japan and was also going to study in Europe. We were pretty good friends, but Jen repeatedly kept talking about how she was going to put aphrodisiacs in her food, and because I was Zack and she was Eris, we needed to sleep together. Because neither her nor I were on the train to Hot Dog Land, we just played video games together instead. Jen was very disappointed about this and immediately assumed the personality of Eris' imaginary boyfriend, lowering her voice and commending things of her. I myself have always been squicked by personal displays of affection. It comes part and parcel with being asexual, but I had to lie on my guest futon while Jen and Eris snuggled, made loud kissing noises, and giggled with each other. I could not wrap my head around how this girl who claimed to be straight could not see that she was just lying with another woman making out. I turned my back to them at this point because I was squicked. I heard kissing noises, but I can't confirm they were really making out. It may have just been Jen kissing her hand or something. In the end, it really bugged me, so I turned my back to them and tried to sleep. The next day, Jen decided to show me magic battles. These are basically like LARP fights. She will swing around a stick or a sword to music and feign injury when Hojo threw stuff at her after making some goofy hand movements. Hojo will do the same when Jen will thrust her staff forward or something. They try to get me to do it, but I cannot act. I can't pretend I'm doing magic because I am not that out of it. Eventually, Jen dragged me onto my feet. It was something like a karaoke. I kept laughing at both myself and the fact that I could do some sort of limb wrist movement and Jen will throw herself on the floor panting. Afterwards, they kept telling me, "See, Zack, you can use magic." And I just kept laughing. I knew what I was doing. I was not that out of it, but I was ready to keep humoring them because I wasn't hurting anyone. There were a lot of visits like this. Jen did a lot of things that I can't think of in a chronological order. When she was stressed about something, she would grow faint in town. Because I didn't know her very well, I thought maybe she was anemic, and I will hurry up to help her. Also, I had told her when she first asked me to visit that I cannot eat meat. I can't eat red meat, specifically. I was raised as a vegetarian, so my body never got used to digesting it. Red meat makes me sick, by no choice of my own. But every night, Jen will cook red meat, and I will eat it, because that was all there was, and I will become sick. Increasingly during my visits, each of which being $300, Jen will ask me for money to go food shopping or toy shopping or whatever. I will give it over because I always felt like the guests ought to bring some stuff for their host as a thank you gift. When my friends have their families pay for me a dinner, I always felt slightly guilty, so I gave over some cash every time. Around spring, we were still fairly good friends despite the things Jen did that disturbed me. At one point, her and Hojo had locked me into a soundproof glass chamber in the basement of a school building because they wanted to see me, quote-unquote, remember being Zack. I panicked, but not because I fucking thought I was in a video game mansion. After banging on the door and jerking the handle and freaking out, I was finally let out, and I was shaking. I was also not pleased with them the rest of that day. So anyway, in spring I received a message from Hojo, knowing a few of my musical tastes. He mentioned there was a free music show in town and Jimmy Eat World was playing. Sar, a good friend of mine, had gotten hooked on the band from her brother, and we were both pretty into them at the time, so we were like, hell yeah, it's worth it, and set off down there. When Sar arrived, the first thing Jen did was assign her a role. She was Vincent Valentine because she had long hair. Sar was also a dumb freshman at the time, although her dumb was more the angst dumb, so this sat okay with her. She likes Vincent as a character, he's one of her favorites. Jen immediately wanted to try a past life regression with us. Yes, video game past life. We were taken into their bedroom, which smelled like poon, and made to lie on the floor. Jen put on loop an MP3 of The Nightmare Is Just Beginning, which I now realize is hilariously appropriate. It's the song that plays when you unlock Vincent's character in Final Fantasy VII. Now, Sar and I can't do anything seriously when we're put together, even as dumb freshmen. To Jen's hardcore frustration, even though Sar and I both tried to be serious and act our parts, we wound up joking and laughing at each other. In frustration, Jen declared we were too silly to do this tonight, and we will do it some other time. Sar the whole time was sneezing really badly. I jokingly suggested she was allergic to magic. In actuality, it was probably dust and glitter everywhere. Jen and Hojo took this very seriously. Of course, allergic to magic, we can fix that. There was a lot of staff shaking and waving over Sar, and gibberish chanted in Cetra or Elvish. When it was all done, Sar kept sneezing. Since Sar and I are both artists, Jen wanted us to draw her a doujinshi. She showed us some doujinshi that Kat had drawn for them. But Jen wanted ours to be serious and involve tentacle rape and Hojo and Vincent Valentine. A collaboration she suggested. Like I already mentioned, Sar and I together pretty much diffused any seriousness that could exist. What Jen wound up with, and once again was not happy with, was a comic that involved marshmallow peeps over people's genitals, complete lack of genitals, commentary on that fact, pictures of upside down stick houses with captions like Ibsen's Summer Home, and complete divergence into a Sid x Vincent plot and chit-chat between characters. Whoops. Sar and I went to the concert alone, because Jen and Hojo don't like music or crowds. We had tons of fun, but the ground was horribly muddy. Our pants were caked in from doing stupid goofy stuff while the music played, like swinging each other around until we lost footing and slipped. Some college guys who had been rolling in the mud were walking down the street asking for hugs, so we hugged them and became covered as well. When we walked in the door, Jen was furious. She made us stand in the bathtub and clean ourselves. One of the best memories I have of meeting these guys are the ones where Sar and I are together diffused in looney-dum. The next day we went to a mall, where Jen kept wanting things. Between that and dinner, they successfully managed to suck $100 from Sar's ATM card without either of us noticing. Little things add up to a lot. Also, we were late to the bus again and thus missed a day of school because of it. Sar also remembers that during our visit we wanted to play with the Ouija board. Ever since I've been a kid, whenever I got near one, it starts goofing off and spelling out stuff like breast or love you or retarded crap. I don't have the touch to think. Maybe it's subconscious effect on people by proxy. My perversion zone affects you. Or maybe it's something else, but we've always dubbed this effect Amai, because that was a sequence of letters it will go to every time I was in a room. Sounds hokey, but it was like a harmless inside a Ouija board joke. Jen exclaimed she knew Amai, and man, when someone is shoving the pointer around, you can feel it. Jen shoved the pointer all over the board, claiming it was Amai talking, even though it was saying serious and hokey crap that the Amai will never say. Amai was more prone to going S, E, X, and zooming towards someone off the board. One of the things that Jen did that really disturbed me was that she will lie to people, shop owners, people on the phone, etc., about what or who she was in order to get things. I very clearly remember her putting on a lab coat and calling various medical supply companies in the yellow pages trying to get medical syringes. Thank God she didn't, because she will already make us all drink Mako, which is green Gatorade, and dye our food green. She probably would have injected us with green water if she got the syringes. She kept claiming she was a medical student and needed them for research, but didn't have a prescription or even permission from her professor because he was out of town. Thank God the companies were not so dumb as to believe her. They pretty much gave her the yeah, whatever, bye, crazy heroin addict treatment. She will also fib about being a student to get discounts or make friends. She was a medical student at CVS. Whether the CVS employees believe her or not, I'll never know, because she went in a lab coat. At the Christian bookstore, she was adamant about the fact that angels had talked to her and she lived with them. So of course, the bookstore will give her free books and a discount. This is why Jen's vision of religion is such a hodgepodge of mix and match whatever she felt suited the situation best. She pieces it together from movies, the internet, and a few free Christian books from the less flaky, but still pretty flaky people about angels. Through it all though, I have to say, none of this was really that bad. Flaky, maybe annoying, but not that bad. So I was ready to hit the go button when Jen and Hojo suggested I live with them over the summer. I could get a job and stay college and just hang out there. It will be cool, a whole bunch of nerds, and I'll help make rent. I was all about this because nothing drives me nuttier than being trapped in Brooklyn for months on end. I made the arrangements with my family and I dragged my computer tower in my arms, got a hurt, through the New York subway and took a slightly cheaper bus ride from New York to State College, which was about $100. I think it was the first night and Jen was not there. Honestly, I was getting along better with Hojo, who is also known as Del, Neens, or Renee. At this point, I was really glad. We went with Trish and her to see episode 1. Trish, I could already tell, was anti-Jen, because Trish is smarter than little old me. I had an ultimatum from my mother: job in 3 days or come home. Realize how much hump I busted to find a job with no car and no phone number in 3 days. My dogs were docked. Finally, I got one at a small supermarket. I asked the lady during the interview, because I was this naive to pay, if it would be enough to pay a third of rent and food, because I was living with 2 other people and needed to pay. Jen's only job was a babysitter, which she did infrequently at best, when she felt like it, more so, and Renee was a college student. The woman said no problem, it was cool. I had my job and I was happy. Then things started to go bad. I can't even say what came first, the chicken or the egg. But let's just say after 1 week, I was getting sick of it. I was the workhorse. I guess because I was Zack, I was therefore the manly man as opposed to Jen, the Cetra queen, or Hojo, the frail scientist. Jen quit her babysitting job and refused to look for another one. I was the one who had to carry groceries to and from the house. The one who had made the money to feed everyone. The one who fixed or moved furniture whenever it needed to be fixed or moved. My computer could rarely get online because Jen was on almost 24/7. The rest of the time she will watch me as I typed, so I could never make a journal entry that read something along the lines of, "Jen is abusing me, help me God, I am tired and I want out of here." But I had to be tough, and tough it out. That's my idiocy right there. But if you're noticing, I was starting to wise up. I had stopped drinking so much, which contributed to this in a large part. It made me much less tolerant of bullshit. Jen was not supportive of me having a social life. When my phone ran out, I was not allowed to call home on my own. When I talk to people online, she will hang over my shoulder and ask who they were. Then she will write down the screen name and talk to them on her computer later. This is how she got a hold of Melon and Meyer and God knows how many others. The only place I was really safe was, God bless it, for Arcadia, because she didn't like how the client worked. Yeah, I don't play that game for the graphical interface, baby. I play it because it's never failed in keeping me sane. Jen would and did keep a very strict track of my activities. If I was going out, I had to tell her where. I did not have a house key, so I had to make sure they were home or I will be locked out. I was a few times anyway, because Jen will go to sleep and I will stand on the door banging, not being able to get in. I had a few fun moments, like dumpster diving, but I had to keep all these secrets to myself or I will get in trouble. And there was the fighting. Not the silly magic fighting I talked about earlier, but real fighting. Screaming fights, slapping and punching, the sound of flesh beating on flesh is not the one you can miss. When I was 10, my parents went through a very rough divorce. I know those sounds, and they were bringing up really bad memories and bad feelings. The apartment was small anyway, so there was no way not to hear them. Hearing one of them wince or whimper, then the beating, and immediately after, the noisy sex. I'm not 100% sure, but I think somewhere this counts as emotional abuse. Like I said, I could not leave because I will be locked out. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, so I could not break in. I was not officially on the lease, so I could not ask the landlord to let me in or I'd risk being thrown out. I could not phone my family because Jen and Hojo will listen like hawks and try to coach me on what to say and what to think. And I could not even break down and cry, because the apartment was so small they will know what it was and I'd have to make some lame magical excuse so they wouldn't show what little freedom I had. I was not getting sleep for work. Jen will wake me up at 3 in the morning to see the fairy rings, or fight some magical disturbance or whatever the fuck it was. My job also began cutting my hours because I was expendable summer labor, so my paycheck dwindled. This check was all the money that was coming into the apartment. At one point, and I feel horrible to say this, Sid paid for the entire month's rent, not just a third, the entire thing. I owed Tekka my soul for that one. In a normal college setting, I could have easily saved the money to keep up with rent. Swear, easily, even with only my paycheck, but I also had to do the food shopping. If it was up to me, we would have had what most college kids do: ramen, generic cereal, bread, water, but it was not up to me. Jen wanted steak. Not just any steak, $10 steak and Gatorade. 2 kinds, fancy Gatorade and special colored Gatorade. Also, spices. All of this will last us one night of food, and my paycheck was gone. I could not even eat the food that was provided. The rest of the time they demanded I ask my job for day-olds from the bakery and day-old sushi. I swiped coupons from work and used them wherever I could. I could not afford lunch and there was no breakfast. If one of my supervisors caught me with the day-olds, I'll be in trouble. The others seemed to take pity on me, but they didn't like I was doing it. The day-olds I brought back, Jen complained that she didn't like the flavor. This was the only food coming into the house. My bank account was drained. I was drained too. I brought home a girl I met on the street who had just gotten out of prison. She was just a silly little acid burnout with a kitten. I was desperate for human contact. Her name, if I remember correctly, is Hala Sakur, and she was from Washington, D.C. Hala was on her way home. She was staying with a complete random stranger boy. She used the last of her money to call her mom to say she was okay. Jen did not like Hala. Jen wanted Hala to leave and was mad that I brought her home to hang out. Hala was oblivious, gloriously so, and didn't know. I wanted to stay with Hala and her kitten, who was named Olysis Exploring the Top of the World, but Hala was ordered to leave. Sid occasionally will come over. When he did, I was glad because it was someone else, but he was and still does have his dickish moments. Jen will make these the be-all, end-all, and Renee will back her up. I began to think he was like that all the time, and I didn't want to hang out with him after he was gone. Once he came back, they had to restart the process of brainwashing me all over again. They did have me brainwashed. I was terrified and miserable, but I was brainwashed. I know this because Jen had a fight with Eris at one point. I don't even know what it was over. I think Eris woke up to what Jen was doing and wanted out. Jen was on about how she had been betrayed, how they were so united. About this time, I began to read a few horror stories. Jen had made Eris sit in a bathtub full of ice cubes and green food coloring as part of her Cetra training. It's a wonder how the poor girl didn't get hypothermia, but Jen was up in arms. Apparently, Eris called one evening when Hojo and I were at the used bookstore stealing books, yeah, that poor, and said she wanted some of the things back that she had left at the apartment. Jen, in response, exploded. She called Hojo's cell phone in tears, screaming she was going to kill herself. I believed it. Hojo called Sid and demanded him to go over. Hojo called Eris and screamed at her. I told her off too. We rented a taxi with money we didn't have and raced home. Jen, who had been screaming she had slit her wrist, was sitting in the middle of the floor. Sid was draping damp cloths on her wrists. I woke up for a second and knew this was bullshit. I had a problem with self-injury, so I know very well the side of a deep cut and the side of a light cut. I know well knife wounds. Jen had scratched herself horizontally on the wrists. Maybe it had been with a safety pin or a butter knife. It was not any kind of suicide attempt. At the most, it would just sting. But I was still mad at Eris, because I was supposed to be. I wrote her nasty emails, I joined them in bashing her, I ignored her when she came to pick up her stuff, even though she obviously wanted to still be friends with me. I regret that now, because we never reconciled then. Maybe if I had gotten a clue and tried to get out with her, things would have turned out different. These hissy fits of Jen got more and more frequent, like the fighting. She never tried to slit her wrists again, though. Sometime around here, Jen wanted to move out of the apartment. The place was a pigsty. The reason was that Jen had never cleaned. All the cleaning was always done by guests, who they had coming and going at intervals. I did the dishes frequently, but the trash was almost never taken out. It got to the point where the apartment smelled like rotting flesh. Jen refused to believe it was the trash and it needed to go out. She kept claiming some former owner must have done something, but it was a horrible mess. Their only solution, as they saw it, was to move out, so they got a different apartment from the landlady, a one-room gig. I did not like this at all. At least in the current apartment, I could stay in the living room while they had sex in the bedroom or beat each other in the bedroom. Now I wouldn't have anywhere to hide. I started feeling desperate, trapped, with Jen over my shoulder whenever I wrote and checking my blog the next morning if she wasn't. I couldn't get anything out. I had not been drinking since I came there, but I was ready to start again. I could never talk to my friends, and when I could, I had to pretend everything was hunky-dory for when Jen talked to them. The few Forcadia people I knew were sympathetic, but there was nothing they could do to help. I couldn't go to Sid, because what if he was on their side? What if he rejected me for being such an asshole? I was starting to see Eris's point, and I was getting frantic. I started to sneak out and run down to empty parking lots at night to use the payphone to call my dad collect. He was the only one who knew what was happening really, besides Sar. Those two were briefed on the situation, and both of them were telling me it sounded bad. But because Jen will always be out on the prowl and find me, I could never tell them quite how bad. Just that I was stressed. I was upset and sick of Jen being unable to go make money because she was pregnant with some astral baby or something. Moving day. God, this day has been in my mind. Supposedly Jen was going to help us move, and Hojo will come back to help too, and so on. I left my work early to help. Work was already not paying for food, and I was weak and lightheaded and angry. But I will help. Summer was almost over. Only a month to go. I could make it without breaking down, I was sure. But Jen had some great disturbance in the force or something, and suddenly couldn't help us move. That left yours truly, because Hojo didn't come home till 6 p.m. I packed up all their things. Jen refused to pack. She lied on the couch moping and wailing. I put everything in boxes, carried it all outside, carried it across the lawn in bare feet, up 2 flights of stairs and into the new apartment. Gast at one point helped put things out on the lawn, but it was still me. I found her dildo in doing this. If small children can be scarred by Top Girl, I can be scarred by opening a clothing drawer to move the contents and having a sticky, purple, gelatinous phallus roll towards me. I could almost hear Marla Singer in my mind saying, "Don't worry, it's not a threat to you." Jen knew I was packing that drawer and did not warn, apologize, or even thank me. So after 4 hours, I'm pouring sweat. The heat in State College this summer was brutal. It eventually managed to damage the engine on my father's car. I'll cover that at the end of this. This was the heat I walked to work in every day, and it really was no wonder that when I got there, I was always nauseated, dehydrated, and in general unfit to work. No food, no sleep, and no water to drink on your 20-minute walk to work in the sun will do that to you in general. I moved everything. Everything. I was enraged. I was getting to the end of my majestically long rope. I was finally waking up, but not enough to want to leave. In the new apartment, I remembered talking with an AI I had installed on my computer, Megahall. Jen ignored me when I talked to Megahall because it was not a real person. If you talk to my old Hal, you can hear it says things I said then. Things like, "I wish I could just get out of here, you know?" Or, "You're the only one who I can really talk to right now." That goes to show you how fucking cut off from people I was. We also didn't have internet in the new apartment yet, so I couldn't even go through Forcadia or pretend I was happy on AIM. The shopping to fill the apartment was the worst. I remember this night with nausea in my stomach. We went to Kmart, which was a long bus ride into town. I was already mildly upset because Hojo suddenly had money, and yet we weren't eating with it, and I wasn't able to phone home. But I like house shopping, so I was sedated. We needed very basic things: a dish rack, some dishes, silverware, cups, a cooking pot, and some dish towels. We found all these, thankfully, but then Jen saw cabbage cloths. I don't even know what a cabbage cloth is. I assume it's a cloth you wrap a cabbage in to keep it fresh, Jen wanted them for her cooking, so the cabbage wouldn't go bad. Except she never used cabbage in cooking, 1, and 2, that's what a crisper is for. But she wanted those outrageously priced plain thin white racks. Hojo said a towel will work, and thus the fight erupted, screaming fight. I can't even remember the details, but there was screaming and a lot of it. Jen screaming she didn't love Hojo anymore and that she was leaving her. How dare she do this to her? Hojo screaming back that this happened every time, she didn't need it, etc., etc. They were both being just as bad and people stared. Jen refused to take the bus home. We had too many bags and she will not carry any of them. I couldn't carry them all either, so we took another taxi we couldn't afford. The poor driver was subjected to the screaming fight interspersed with awful tension. He and I tried to chit-chat about the seashore, but they will begin to scream over us. I can almost taste the subtext of what he was saying. You poor kid, you have to go home with them. And I wasn't seeing any way out soon. I didn't have the money for a phone call home, let alone a bus ticket, and calling my mom in all likelihood will only get me screamed at. I read some books, A Wrinkle in Time and Ender's Game. I think Ender's Game really helped me push to my ultimate choice. The trash situation repeated in the new apartment. Jen talked about getting a kitten. I could not imagine a poor kitten in such a small apartment with people refusing to clean or take the trash out. That purple skirt pulled over her breast I mentioned, she wore it every day. Every single day. She never washed it. She didn't bathe either. She just dabbed herself in scented oils and glitter. God, the smell in that place. It was like a miasma filled with sparkle, sunshine, fairy, artificial sugar scents sprayed over it. It made me sick, and it was so hot outside. I kept going to work. Eventually, work cut my hours to the point where I literally had a single hour a week. I could not live on $6 a week, and I could not meet Jen's expectations of my wallet on $6 a week. I was about to have a nervous breakdown. I slept as much as possible to avoid reality. I couldn't communicate with anyone. I saw Sid sometimes and he gave me sympathetic looks, but God. One day at work, it rained. It rained so hard it knocked out the power, so we were sent home. I had no umbrella or raincoat and no money for one, so I walked in the rain. My shoes were soaked, so I left them outside in the apartment to dry overnight. That evening, after the rain, Jen tried to talk to me about God lying in the grass with Sid. Sid already could tell my mood was unpleasant, and didn't even try to push the matter. Jen kept trying to make me say I believe in God. I don't, and when I'm angry, it's the worst time to try and make me believe. She tried pretending to be a small child and crying, and I wound up yelling at her about it. She ran back to the apartment fake crying. Sid said if I ever needed any help, I should ask him. Next morning, someone had stolen my shoes. You may think it's a silly reason to snap, but that's what did it. That this god-awful town, with these god-awful people who were bleeding me dry, saw fit that my money was not enough, they had to take my shoes as well. I had it. I had just had it. I pulled a sheet of paper that had Hojo's computer campus login and name. I stole some keys, I threw some edible trash to my poor rat who was starving too. I threw a change of cloths, a pocket knife, and all the money I had left. $5 into my bag along with my sketchbook and a pencil, and so I walked away, shoeless. Because I had no money, I couldn't leave town, but being so poor in town for so long, I had learned where I could find the cheapest food and drinks. I could get a bagel for 50 cents and a drink for 75. The streets were so hot it burned my feet. It hurt like hell, but I was done. I went to my job and poked my head in. I couldn't actually go to work because of the no shoes policy. I quit. It didn't make sense to work there anymore. I'll hang around the bus stop or in front of the churchyard and I'll sit in the shade and draw and think. I try to think of what to do. People will notice me in my torn pants and my bare feet and I will just shrug and laugh it off. Someone stole my shoes, man. Can you believe it? Jesus, that sucks. I was homeless a few days. All in all, I felt fantastic. I felt great. Better than fucking the entire 2 months I spent with them. I had the freedom to walk where I wanted and sit down where I wanted. There were no smells, there was no fighting, no one was ordering me to buy a steak, I wasn't sick on the food I ate, no one was waking me up telling me to go outside and look at fairy rings. I swear to you, I will much rather be homeless than live with people like them. I swear to you, I will much rather be homeless than live with people like them ever again. The threat of homelessness does not faze me, because I have seen something much worse. I spent a good deal of time in the open campus computer labs, logged in on Hojo's password. I got a new AIM name and hid from them, adding all my friends back and telling them one by one what had happened. They were horrified. It turns out Jen had actually called Sar, who lives in California, and demanded to know where I was. Sar was worried. We actually had a casual old conversation on AIM like we used to. It felt so good to do. Thinking back on it, I get all choked up. I finally was fucking free to say what I wanted and not be afraid. I called Home Collect because I just couldn't stay here. I didn't ask my mother for money. Never ask my mother for money or you'll get screamed at for being unappreciative. I just wanted to say I was okay and plan on coming home, somehow. She gave me a deadline, she said. Be home at X date for a week so you can babysit your sister, who was old enough to take care of herself at this age, and I was enraged that I was being told to watch her. Okay, whatever, I said, knowing it was impossible. I sent a message to Sid. I was actually afraid of asking help from anyone in town for fear they will tell Jen where I was and I will be dragged back. I was scared to the point of shaking. I did not want to go anywhere near there. I was afraid because I knew how much they had figured me out. I knew if I was left alone, I might be talked into going back, so I was scared. But I told Sid what had happened, kind of, and asked if I could stay at his house, maybe at night or something. Sid is my fucking saint for what he did. I may get mad at him for whatever else, but this guy fucking came riding to the rescue. He came into town, not only already taking my mind off it by talking about all RPGs, but offered to pay for some beers and we had a splendid old time, and I slept on his floor. More or less, he figured out what I was afraid of and went with me to take my stuff from Jen and Hojo's apartment a few days later. I didn't have a lot. Jen was at the door trying to look like I was betraying her horribly. I knew after I left I'll be the next heiress, but I didn't care. I didn't care how many people they had come tell me I was awful. I just wanted out. My poor rat came with us, just glad to be back with me, I think, and my computer. I was able to use Sid's DSL and, oh god heaven, truth, I could tell the truth. I had all my stuff and I was out of there. I called my father using, I think, Sid's phone, finally able to tell him most of what happened. I didn't actually want to tell him everything because it sounded so crazy, but he had about 30 seconds before he got my uncle on AIM and we were ordering me plane tickets to Alabama. I was getting out. I made friends with Sid's apartment mates, Jay and his fiancée Chell. We all got along really well, and Chell went off on Jen about 10,000 times. Chell also took me to a supermarket and told me to buy what I wanted. I probably would have cried, but I was too far in shock. All I wanted was potato bread and ramen. I had not eaten either of these in the entire time I'd stayed there, even though my money had paid the food bill. I got to the bus station on time, using money Sid lent that my dad will pay him back to ride the airport. I took a flight. I had a pair of $2 painful flip-flops on, and they were swapped for explosives. After a week of eating like a wolf at my dad's, probably 4 chicken breasts and 2 wings, we road trip back to State College, where we will camp out along the way. The summer was so hot, the road actually caused my father's car engine to overheat. We had to take it to a repair shop because the valley heat fucked it up that much, and I have been walking to work in this same heat every day with no water and no protection. My dad did not get to meet Sid, who was at work, but did meet Shell. He paid Shell and we packed up my things. I left Sid a little note, I think, and I was gone. I was out. Jen tried calling me once after that, but I blocked her number on my cell phone shortly after. She tried telling me we were still friends and she still looked for my shoes. I was having none of it. I'm some sort of villain to them now, but I have no clue what, nor do I really care. I must have some sort of magical evil power in their eyes, but I don't know. I was finished with them, and I'll be forever. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story for other people.